Things we can improve in. There's some plays that the quarterback can play better. There's some plays that the quarterback's right and there's a breakdown in protection. Some plays where the quarterback's right and there's a breakdown in the route. It's a variety of things. Same thing for coaching or playing any of the position on the field. It's good things. There's all things we got to work on. That's what we go back in and talk about.
All right, so here we go. Bad offense and all that into the first preseason game tomorrow night against the Giants. Here's how the Pats have prepared for their football game tomorrow night. It is still a football. I know it's preseason, but it is a football game. Okay, they had 3 days of non-padded practices. They had a day off. Then they came back in pads. I think that's August 1st and 2nd. Then the 3rd, Bill scaled back to shells again. And then he came back with pads, but it wasn't contact. Then they had that stadium practice, which was in pads but non-contact. Then he gave them 2 days off and all of Monday off until afternoon practice. He moved the Monday practice from the morning to Monday afternoon. Then he came back and they had another couple days here on the 8th and the 9th. But from what I understand yesterday was non-competitive.
Yeah.
So I've been saying they've had 3 or 4 padded competitive practices, okay, where they had the pads on and doing a little bit of thumping. I think it might be less than 3 or 4. It might be 2. They're not ready to play a football game tomorrow.
Yeah, and like in Bill's defense, some of that is prescribed by the NFL. You have to go. Right. It's in the CBA. You have to go at the beginning. You have to go 5 days until you can be in pads, and the guys have to get a day off, or 5 practices. Guys have to get a day off after 5 days, whatever. But you're right. I mean, I would say, to me, they're behind. Now, what does that mean? In the past, they'd be behind in the regular season for the first 4 games. It didn't mean much. They'd still win their 12 games. But with the new coaching staff and a second-year quarterback, I'm not sure they can afford to be behind. It could be the difference between making the playoffs or not.
It's kind of hard to figure out, though. You know, what's the end game for Bill Belichick? I mean, why is he doing this? It's not injury related.
No.
It's not teaching. If they have the day off, it's not like, well, you're not going to be out there in pads. We're going to teach. I just don't understand why. I understand the CBA part.
Yeah, the CBA mandates a lot of this.
But going the extra, it seems like there's an
Well,
extra.
I think when you, for example, the in-stadium practice, right? They're in pads, but it's sort of non-competitive, right? Or at least it's like 3/4 speed competitive. You do that when you feel like guys aren't getting it. You know, we can't, it's almost like taking a math class. Like, we can't move on to the next thing until I know you guys get this concept. And you're not getting this concept.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of where the issue is. They're not even close to game planning anything, but you can't game plan anything if you can't get the basics and the basic tenets of your offense down consistently and reliably.
Yeah, that's when I dropped out of trigonometry. I dropped out so the class could move on.
Now, what was the one before that? Algebra? Okay, so Bedard had another good one, I thought, on the Pats' first-round pick, who was supposed to be a safe pick, plug-and-play, ready to go, Cole Strange as a guard. We hated it because it was such a safe pick. The guy's going to play. You can bury him, etc. How's he look so far, Greg?
To this point, right now, he has not been good in camp, and he's part of the issue on the offensive line. He's having trouble with the scheme. He has trouble in team, in one-on-ones. The only other offensive lineman who has a worse loss rate than him is Bill Murray, the converted guy who converted from defensive tackle to the offensive. Bill Murray went from defensive line last year to offensive line, and he's the only offensive lineman with a worse one-on-one record than Cole Strange, who I have is 2-6-1.
Yeah, I don't know what you have him in one-on-ones, Gasper.
I defer to Bedard on the offensive line stuff.
Is that a concern?
It is. I will say this, though. The Cole Strange pick makes a lot more sense to me now when I see what they're trying to do offensively, because when you play this style of offense, this Shanahan-McVay thing, you need offensive linemen, particularly on the interior, who can really move and are athletic, and that's what he is. You know, he needs a little more sand in the pants, as they say in the scouting world, but I'm not worried about him long term. Now this pick makes a lot more sense to me.
All right, Chris, how should they handle it tomorrow night? What? Hold on.
I'm just wondering, like, why does it make more sense to you when, you know, this is a guy they picked at 29.
Yeah.
Right? Was it 29 when they picked him? And you could have had him. You could have had him later.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess picking him on the roster makes sense, but picking him where they picked him is even stranger, no pun intended.
But there's only probably, they only probably felt there's a few guards that really fit what we want to do. If we miss them, we're in trouble.
How should they handle tomorrow night?
I think Mac Jones should play. I think he should play a series. I think they could use the gauge of sort of where they're really at and use that film. On the other hand, maybe they look at it and they're like, we don't want to get this guy killed. You know, we don't feel like we can block anything. We've had communication problems up front. It hasn't looked good. But I think that they They need all the competitive snaps they can get to try and rectify this thing. And I don't think that they really are in a position to say, oh, you know, all these offensive guys, these first-team offensive guys are just going to sit out and not play at all. They should play a series or two.
Okay, well, can they afford to get off to a slow start? Let's take a look at the Ford Big Board. Built for America, built Ford proud. Here's a look at the Pats' first 4 games of the season. I think it's a killer start to the season. I really do. At Miami, always a tough, even when you're good.
Right.
That's often a loss.
Yep.
At Miami, at Pittsburgh, home Baltimore, who should be really good this year, at Green Bay. Okay? And then you look at the final 6 games of the year. We'll look at that in a second. That's a killer, too. Can they afford a bad start? They always could afford a bad start with Tom Brady here. Can they do it now?
Yeah, and that's what I said, previously. I don't think they can. Not when you look at how much better I think the AFC has gotten. I think to be very competitive. Indianapolis is a team that blew a playoff spot last year, that last game against Jacksonville. They went from Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan. I think that's an upgrade, especially when you're coached by Frank Reich and you have that running game. Denver's better. They have Russell Wilson. So when you look at the totality of the AFC, I don't think the Patriots are in a position where they can say, oh, their first 4 games, an extension from training camp. No, because losing 1 or 2 of those games could be the difference between making the playoffs or not.
Real quick, Mike. Well, let me just give you the final 6 real quick because we have it. That first 4, tough, and now the last 6. You got the Bills twice. We all know that. The Bengals who went to the Super Bowl last year. Okay, home Miami you got to like, but there's a road trip there at Arizona back to back. Okay, so if you start out 1-3 and then finish 2-4, I mean, do the math. You got to make hay in those 7 games in the middle.
I would say on those first 4 games, you're right. That's a tough start to the season. If you come out of there 2-2, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. And if you come out of there 2-2, if you look at the next part of the schedule, now we already looked at the first 4 and the last 6. The next part of the schedule, I mean, you got a breeze there. You got the Browns without Deshaun Watson. You got the Lions. You got the Bears without N'Keal Harry. I'm just kidding.
The Jets in there.
I'm kidding. You got the Jets. All right, so you should be able to put string some things together. But let me just point out to you, rough start. When's the last time you had a rough start? Last year. They were 1-3. Start off 1-3, and we're able to turn it around. So I don't think we should say, oh, go back to the Brady days. You don't have Tom Brady anymore. You have Tom Brady last year, and it looked like a disaster. And they were able to, after that 1-3 start, win 6 of the next 7? So we've seen them turning around.